came here to study herbalism at the Southwest Institute of Healing Arts over 3 years ago. Got my certification in December of 2010 and launched the Alchemy of Avalon website in October of 2012. So I thought I'd start off with a basic lecture that I actually did for my class in Sweeha. So this is called Preparation of Camellia sinensis, aka tea. So Camellia sinensis is the Latin name for the tea plant. So when you're drinking a tea and you see that it's called black tea or green tea or white tea or oolong tea, they're all the same exact plant, they've just been processed different ways. So I'll go ahead and I'm just going to be reading you from here, but at the end we'll have time for questions. So a few basic tea facts. The leaves of the Camellia sinensis plant are what we know as tea. It does not come from the Camellia sinensis plant. What you are drinking is not technically tea, but is an infusion of an herb or root, such as rooibos, peppermint leaves, ginger, etc. A good general rule for loose leaf tea preparation is to use 1 teaspoon of tea per 8 ounces of water. The myth that tea has more caffeine than coffee is just that, a myth. While in some cases a tea may yield more caffeine than some coffees, Camellia sinensis also contains L-theanine, an amino acid which promotes alpha waves in the brain, aka the meditative state, making us feel calm yet alert. This also causes the caffeine to release more slowly and steadily into the bloodstream, so even the most caffeinated teas are not nearly as hard as coffee is on our systems. Okay, so we have the 3 T's of tea, so type, temperature, and timing. So, types of tea. So this will go more into what I was just explaining. So black tea is the most caffeinated of all the teas because it is the most oxidized or fermented. Typically it has the smallest, shortest, darkest leaves. It hails from many countries including India, Kenya, Sri Lanka, and China. Black teas in general have a deep brownish red infusion and a robust tannic taste, and it's often served with milk. Then we have our oolongs or pu'ers. Pu'ers are aged teas, and these have varying degrees of caffeine as some are more oxidized than others. Sometimes this category is called blue tea, and within this group are some very rare and high-end teas. Tastes range from basic Chinese tea we all know from restaurants to complex, buttery, floral infusions. Then we have green tea. So green tea has about 40% the caffeine of black tea. The leaves range in size and shades, and it basically comes from 2 countries, which is China or Japan. Okay? The Chinese and Japanese green teas have distinctly different colors and tastes due to the way they're processed. So the Japanese, in general, those are grassier, and they're going to be a brighter green color. So if you've ever had sencha, that's your most basic green tea. Those are that way because the Japanese process their green teas with steaming, and it's almost a more technologically centered processing. Chinese, those are going to be more subtle, more smooth, and yield a more golden infusion. The Chinese actually really like this. They process their green tea. I watched it in a video. It looks like a big wok, but it's like up against the wall, kind of, sort of, and it's open, and then they have these special, like, ritualistic little brooms, and they spin the leaves around like a certain number of times. So it hits this magic number, and it's ready to go. It's really cool. So I think Mr. Miyagi would appreciate it. Then you've got white tea. White tea contains trace amounts of caffeine, can't even be detected or quantified, because it's basically the virgin tea leaf, dried and not really fermented at all. Basic white tea leaves are big, light, and fluffy, and they yield a pale golden infusion and typically have a light, floral, or almost nutty taste or aroma. So for those of you who drank or looked at the the Sacred Garden tea, those leaves are like, they almost will pop out of the bag when you open it. They're really fluffy and light. Okay, so now we go on to temperature. So the temperatures for steeping, you've got black tea, which wants to be steeped between 200 and 208 degrees Fahrenheit. So just short of a boil, okay? And then you've got both your highly and lightly oxidized oolongs and pu'ers should be steeped at about 190. Then you've got green and white teas, so because those are more delicate and less processed, you want to steep those around 170 to 175. And then I that would be kind of the equivalent to, let's say you're doing your Thanksgiving turkey and it should be, roasted at 425 and you put it up to 475 or something. You don't want to do that. You're basically burning the tea and then not getting all the flavors or constituents out of it. Okay, so next you have your timing. This is, I think, where most people, this is like the make or break. Because if you forget about it, it can oversteep. They do make little tea timers, which are really handy. So optimum steep times are going to be 3 to 4 minutes for black tea. And usually, with black tea, it really only gives you one quality infusion, maybe 2. So you might be able to steep that one more time, but after that, you should toss it. However, you've got oolong and pu'er teas, which can be steeped up to 6 times. And those should be steeped for about 4 minutes as well. If you've got a really trained palate, I was actually telling this to you guys earlier, you can notice a slightly different flavor with each infusion of your oolong tea. It's nicknamed the champagne of teas, and that's basically the reason why. It's the most delicate, the most subtle, and you can pick up, it's like the guy from Sideways. You can get any little flower or flavor out of that. Your green and white teas, you want to steep for 2 to 3 minutes. I personally feel that white tea by itself should lean toward the 2-minute end of that window, but it's personal preference. For me, I tend to steep my teas a little slightly on the light side because I feel like I can get more of the flavor. So, but depending, if you're going to add milk to it or something like that, then obviously steep it a little bit more. Okay, so some other random facts. Rooibos and herbal teas, which are technically not tea, they're infusions or tisanes. In general, those can be steeped for 7 to 10 minutes. You can go up to the boiling point, especially if you want to get medicinal qualities out of the herbs. So, and especially with certain herbs, if you've got like a root, such as licorice root or ginger root, you can even do with those what's called a decoction, which means that you leave it on the heat instead of turning the heat off and taking it away. So it's almost like letting it simmer a little bit to really pull the constituents out of that. The amount to use per cup would completely depend on the herb. Rooibos can be a really great substitute for black tea. So if you can't have caffeine, but you want a tea that's going to stand up to milk and has a little bit of a tannic quality, go with the rooibos, like in the Anne Boleyn blend. When you make loose leaf tea, just remember to ask yourself the 3 hows: how much, how long, and how hot. Traditional tea preparations are going to vary from country to country. So, for example, the English always have and always will take pride in serving traditional black tea, such as English breakfast, which is basically made up of Assam tea. And Assam is the region that tea comes from in India. So again, tea becomes like wine in that sense, where a lot of the time the name comes from the region where it's grown. And they'll do that, of course, with milk and sugar in the afternoon for the sandwiches. I also like to bring up the tea ritual scene in Karate Kid Part 2, speaking of Mr. Miyagi. So those of us who grew up in the 80s. If you remember the little girl that Daniel-san falls in love with, she makes matcha. So what that is green tea powder. And that is the entire tea leaf ground up. So you're not just infusing it, you're drinking the leaf. So that actually does have quite a high caffeine yield. So if you are, let's say, a coffee drinker, it doesn't taste anything like coffee, but if you want something comparable to the caffeine yields that coffee gives you, I would start with matcha. If you can get into the grassy flavor of it, it's awesome. It's so good for you. It's very expensive, but it's really worth it. And what you want to do with that is you're going to take 1 teaspoon, like a heaping teaspoon of the matcha powder, and put that in 4 ounces of very hot water, boiling. And ideally, you're going to have one of those little whisks, just like she does in the movie. So you're going to take the whisk, and you're not even going to whisk it like when you scramble eggs or whatever. You're going to kind of like, if this is the cup, and you've got hot water and the matcha, you're kind of going to go in like a turning motion, like almost like grinding powder. So that's it. So does anybody have any questions about how to prepare your tea? Anybody have any success stories or epic fails, like a tea tasted like crap, why did that happen? Something like that. Anything?